Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today, we have Daniel McAdams, our co host. Daniel, good to see you this morning.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. How are you this morning?
Good. I
Good.
managed to get here. I'm not wet.
Yeah, you will be when you leave.
If that keeps up, you know what happens when you have rain constantly? You could cause a flood.
Don't
But
say that.
there's parts of Texas, though, right now it's dry.
Yeah.
But being along the coast, we end up with more. Anyway, there's raining problems around the world still, and no sun shining in Ukraine. And there's some things going on over there that we're looking at as if it might be expanding. Of course, we knew where the Germans have stood on this, but they're really going to. Merz, the chancellor, says, you better get prepared. It's going to be a long war. We're not giving up. And, before you know it, the Russians are going to be in Berlin. So we have to do something.
Been there,
As
done
Germany
that.
steps forward as the key backer of Ukraine. Of course, that means America's not the key backer anymore, and they don't send anything. My guess is that we're still very much involved. But anyway, we shouldn't be. We should never have been involved. We should never have been, involved in the coup. We should have more people, journalistically speaking, to tell us and tell the people how this thing all got started and why 2014 is such an important date, and also the old history of Ukraine. Who were the people that lived in Ukraine for the longest? And for some reason, they forget that and they're not interested in it. But right now, it looks like that Germany wants the message out. If America won't send enough bombs, we're going to do it, and we can make the money as well as they can. So that's where they stand. But I would say this is not good news, although we shouldn't be shocked. Like, who would have ever guessed that they didn't let go on this? But it's such a shame. It goes on and on. So if the breaking out of this war and it's been going on who was running Ukraine, but 2014 is when it was NATO's decision, along with America, to decide that they didn't like the elected leader of Ukraine. But I've never heard that said in the major networks. That it's always Russia invaded, but never under what circumstances.
Yeah.
So I would consider this bad news, but there's also talk that people do realize, they have to realize that these prolonged wars, they end badly. Usually countries lose a lot of people die, and a lot of people starve to death, and a lot of money is spent. People go bankrupt, and so this idea that we're going to expand this and clean up this mess is far from the truth.
Well, Germany's new Chancellor Friedrich Merz got into some trouble this week, and that's really what we're trying to say because, well, first of all, he's trying to play the tough guy. He's got Zelensky on the way. He's probably there now. Friedrich Merz was the first chancellor designate in history to not get sufficient votes on the first round to be named chancellor. It's never happened. So he's obviously an extremely unpopular person, an unpopular politician from the CDU, the conservatives. And so he's trying to play the tough guy. And he's done a couple of things this past week that have actually made him look more buffoonish than tough guy-ish. Now, put this first one up. This is from Zero Hedge. And this is Merz, as you said, Dr. Paul. He's warning that the war is going to go on a lot longer. He said wars typically end because of economic or military exhaustion on one side or on both sides in this war. We are obviously still far from reaching that conclusion, that situation, Merz said in a joint press conference with Finnish Prime Minister in Finland. Can't pronounce his name. So that is true. Wars generally end because of economic or military exhaustion. He probably, having read a little bit of history, he should probably understand that. But go to the next one. And here he continues. He says, so we may have to prepare for a longer duration. To which I'm sure the Ukrainians would say, who's this we? because we're the ones that are fighting and dying and bleeding in here. Anyway, he articulated his view that Russia's Putin is just using ceasefire talks to string the West along while he intensifies strikes against Ukraine. He said this is consistent with Putin's viewing peace talks with Ukraine as a sign of weakness. And that, of course, is the classic neocon line that, this or that, whatever leader's in the crosshairs, he only understands strength. Saddam only understands weapons and strength. Gaddafi only understands strength. This is the line from Central Casting on this thing.
And then they throw in the issue of patriotism. If you oppose anything, you're not patriotic, you're against the military, you're against national defense. And of course, those are all based on lies. And so I cannot see how all of a sudden this is going to shift, because it's been, some ups and downs. They have peace talks, but nothing seems to amount to it. And I've, often mentioned that, they do end with bankruptcy. But look how long it took for us to get enough common sense to say it's not going well in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And it's not going well in the Middle East. That's when they decide they have to come home. And then why did you go? There were a lot of people saying don't go. We begged and pleaded, don't go into the Middle East or Afghanistan. It's not worth it. Why don't we learn the lesson of Russia and Afghanistan? At least they had an end point, and we pestered them enough to say, well, we're gonna punish you if you stay in there invading Afghanistan. So we had to go in there and act so foolishly. We're doing it all over the place. I mean, it was just announced that we already have standing military operation in Taiwan.
Yeah.
500 soldiers over there. Now that really makes a lot of sense. That if China's going to do something with Taiwan, what are we going to do? Rush over there and do something. Somebody's going to, Graham, if he's president by then, that's exactly what he would do.
Yeah.
I hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah. Well, Merz continued in his tough guy role. This next clip is Dr. Paul, what he said. He said, after these last 3 weeks, no one can seriously accuse us of not having exhausted all available diplomatic means, which is absolutely untrue, because all they did, as you know, Dr. Paul, because we've talked about it on the show, all the Europeans have done these last 3 weeks is tell Russia the same thing. Ceasefire. You need to have a ceasefire. Russia says, well, why would we stop fighting when we're winning? And B, why would we stop fighting while you continue to deliver weapons to the other side? Nobody would ever do that. Ceasefire. Stop shooting. Of course they wouldn't do that. But then he went even further. And this is where he actually got into trouble, Dr. Paul, because he went out and he claimed, if you put that next clip up, he claimed that he was now lifting restrictions on Ukraine's firing missiles into Russia. He said Ukraine can now attack military positions in Russia. There are no longer any restrictions, said Merz. Now, we'll get to why that was wrong in a minute, but we do have to point out, Dr. Paul, the reaction. I've put on the next one, Margarita Simonian, who is the director of RT. She had a very funny retort. She said, word in Moscow is if Merz uses German weapons to strike Moscow, and we all know that Kiev has no independent capacity to operate Tauruses or other long-range missiles, then Russia will have no choice but to strike Berlin directly. Simple enough. So, tough warning.
Very clear cut. So, what are we going to expect to happen now? Because I can't see much good coming from this. And we could stop it immediately. We just quit funding it.
Yeah. And
we should have prevented it. Why? How could we have done that? Not support the coup, not support NATO, and bring the troops home. And they say, oh no, we had to bring about peace and fairness in the world, and that's our job. We're part of the United Nations, and we have this international responsibility, and that's why we're doing the world so much good. But it would have been so easy to prevent. and it would be still so
Yeah.
easy. It would have been, and Trump in a way hinted it to this. I want to end wars and I
Yeah.
stop that, but just to stop it. But the weapons still are flowing in there. And the Middle East doesn't stop. Then you read about Taiwan.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's lo and behold, Daniel, we have concluded that our foreign policy needs some revamping.
Well, if Trump had done what he said, like you say, he could have said, "Okay, Mertz, if you want to continue, if you want to try this a third time, because you've invaded Russia twice now over the past 100 years, you want to go for a hat trick, go for it. You're on your own."
Yeah,
But he didn't say that. But nevertheless, Mertz making a big deal of lifting the restrictions on long-range missiles is what got him in trouble, because those restrictions, in fact, were lifted by Biden back before Biden was out of office. And people know that. It's not like people don't know that this is what happened. And see, so he ended up wanting to look like a tough guy, ended up looking like a fool. And I go to this next piece. This is the Politico article, Dr. Paul, that we discussed. Germany's Merz under fire over contradictory remarks on long-range weapons. If you go to the next one, because what people were thinking is that this announcement meant that he was going to send Taurus missiles to Ukraine. And he got into a bind because everyone in his coalition said, no, this isn't happening. There's no way this is going to happen. So he ended up actually looking foolish and under fire at the moment that Zelensky came to town, and he wanted to look like this big, brave German leader. So it all blew up in Merz's face. But there still is a danger, as you said, Dr. Paul, because the Germans and the Europeans are desperate to get Trump on their side. And Trump, we talked about it, I think, yesterday, has said some pretty tough things about Russia these last few days. Putin is crazy. I don't know what he's doing. I don't like him anymore. We're no longer friends. So anyway, it's a mess.
They don't know what they miss if they, and how much better they could sleep at night if they had a non-intervention foreign policy. They could talk to everybody.
Yeah.
Say, look, this is what we do, and we're not going to interfere. We're not sending any weapons over there. If you want advice, you shouldn't do it. But just don't think that we have this responsibility. But there's so many motivations in there. Of course, behind the scenes, the motivation is money. People make money off wars. Somebody wants to that is a racket.
Yeah,
war is a racket, and it certainly is. And it just goes on, and the people go along with it. And unfortunately, the victims are so often. I mean, it's our war. It's the taxpayer of America right now that if we had not taken this position, America would be a different place to live in. It's always an excuse for invasion of our privacy, and then they say, well, we have trade problems now. Well, we have to have tariffs. Oh, we have a deficit. Yeah, that's something we just forget about all the time. We have this deficit, so we'll just print more money, and they go on. And it would be so simple and so helpful and so positive if we just said, we'll talk to you, we'll trade with you, but you got to do it straightforward, and stay away. We're not going to get involved in your military activities unless you are really threatening us, you know. But this whole idea that for somehow or another, we have to, be in this charade against Russia right now. Russia, the closest they came to has been long past, and that was Cuba. And that was dissipated pretty well.
Well, you mentioned that these wars are our wars because we fund them. Well, here's another one that is also our wars, and this is the second topic we want to cover. And thanks to Dave DeCamp for writing this up at antiwar.com. This is a shocking headline. If you go forward one, this is a shocking headline. The United States has delivered 90,000 tons of weapons to Israel in nearly 600 days. So in less than 2 years, 90,000 tons of weapons. The U.S. has delivered 90,000 tons of bombs, guns, and other military equipment to Israel since October 7th of 23. to support the genocidal war against Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, according to numbers from the Israeli Defense Ministry. The Defense Ministry said Tuesday that the 800th plane carrying U.S. weapons arrived in Israel in the morning, and 140 ships have also delivered U.S. equipment in the nearly 600 days since October 7th. This fits exactly into your category, Dr. Paul. This is our war. It's our
Yes.
weapons.
It's, here it is. There's a famine going on, and people are dying by the droves, and we have all these problems. When I first saw the picture of these ships coming in, are these relief vessels coming in to bring food for these starving people? No, it was almost to set them up because they talk about it, and I imagine some people know exactly how to make the plans, but they couldn't just to make that many mistakes where they kill so many children.
Yeah.
I mean, they said, well, you shouldn't put soldiers into the hospitals, and we're just defending our country. All that garbage.
Yeah. Well, that second clip, if you put it up, this is from the same article, and this exactly goes to the point you made. Israeli military officials have previously said that without U.S. military support, Israel wouldn't be able to sustain operations in Gaza for more than a few months. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said last week that without U.S. backing, Israel wouldn't be able to achieve its goals in Gaza, which include, and I highlight this, complete destruction of the territory and the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian population, which is exactly what's being done. Now, you made reference to the aid that was, quote unquote, delivered yesterday. That was really a sham, and it was really something awful and disgusting. And I do have a picture that I want to show, but first I want to put up this video, that one video clip that we have. These are the Palestinians. They've been starving. They haven't had food come in since March. Finally, a little bit of aid comes, and they run toward it. And if you put that, actually, can you just back out so I can read the caption? I think that's important. Go up a little bit here if you can. It says, at least 3 Palestinians were reportedly killed and 46 injured after the Israeli occupation opened fire on those desperately seeking food near the distribution point today in Rafah in southern Gaza. So they finally got food in. They were rushing to get the food, and the Israelis opened fire and killed them. So let's watch. This is a clip of that happening. You can hear the gunfire in the background. Let's just listen to about 35 seconds of this. So that's enough. So, yeah, shooting starving people is not a good look. But I'll tell you something else that's not a good look. Someone else did. Obviously, I did not do this, but someone else did this. And you might say this is hyperbole, and perhaps it is, but this is an awful image. Put that next image up. Someone made the comparison. The picture, I think, above Dr. Paul is the one you were talking about. The people in Gaza forced into these tiny caged areas to get a little bit of food. And someone made the comparison to the terrible situation of the Jews in Eastern Europe, Poland, 1945. The similarities there, I think, are unmistakable. And it is very, very terrible situation.
Yeah, it just doesn't stir people up enough to do anything about it. They want to be in denial. But when I saw that they're actually leading people to food and rescue, and they end up getting shot at.
Yeah.
So it makes no sense whatsoever. And of course, we've been involved in this so often behind the scenes or indirectly, or supporting of international organizations and assumption of of the world that we are to provide the peace and prosperity, but we're also involved in preserving our empire, which motivates us to be involved with this and make use of anything possible because people love it. They like it to be strong and tough. It's almost like they're our football team, and yeah, but it's more than their football game when except that sometimes the football games end up rather violent.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's patriotism that's used to, motivate people to do that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it does. And the thing is, it was said, well, you want us to do something about it. You sound like interventionists. No, actually, that's the simplest thing ever. Just no more arms shipments. We don't want to go in there. We don't want to invade and tell Israel what to do, but just no more weapons. We don't want to do it in our name. Simple. Solution is right there. Terrible. Well, let's finish up here with a little bit. Here's someone we haven't talked about too much lately, and this is Elon Musk. And now there have been a lot of reports about him being unhappy and disappointed. Politico ran with a piece today saying Musk says he's disappointed with Trump-backed mega bill. You go to the next one. Elon Musk seems to be unhappy with the sweeping spending bill narrowly passed by the House at the urging of President Donald Trump. Musk, in unusual criticism of a cause favored by his ally, the president, said in an interview excerpt released Tuesday that the Trump-backed big, beautiful bill contradicts the goals of his Department of Government Efficiency. Here's a quote from Musk. I was disappointed to see the massive spending bill, frankly, which increases the deficit, not just decreases it, and undermines the work of the DOGE team is doing, he said. So, rightly notice that this bill is at cross purposes with what he's been trying to do.
One of the supporters for DOGE and Musk is Senator Ron Johnson.
Yeah.
And he's working at it. But then the sentence in this article says, Republican Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson, a Trump ally, is pushing for deeper cuts to reduce the deficit. And he does. He's very sincere in doing this. But I guess he strays from my thoughts on how to do this. Matter of fact, I don't know for sure exactly where he is on this, but others in the GOP object to the extent of Medicaid cuts. And I understand that too, because I said that's where you leave it to last.
Yeah.
And well, our suggestion is you cut the militarism. Others in the GOP object to the extent of Medicaid cuts in the legislation and the rollback of Inflation Reduction Act. But there's nothing mentioned, about cutting. I guess there aren't any real, Rand and a couple other ones might do this. But so I don't know. And I shouldn't even bring that up because I don't know Ron Johnson's position.
Yeah. But still, it's obvious. The cutting the military is obvious.
But there's all these other things that are mentioned.
Yeah. It's very obvious. So Musk continued. He said, I think a bill can be big or it can be beautiful, but I don't know if it can be both, in my personal opinion, he said. And we know why Politico published this piece, because they want to highlight what they believe are cracks between friction between Trump and Elon. And they like that because they want to make both of them look bad because they hate them. But reading between the lines, you can also come to other conclusions, which is that DOGE and Elon Musk put out the effort to identify all of this waste and abuse in government, tons and tons of them, maybe not as much as they claimed, but lots of it. And Congress did nothing. They don't want to talk about that part, but Congress did nothing to get these cuts. They could have done something.
The momentum is so great. The cuts, I never expected them to be cut. I always thought it was worthwhile because of the information, and they list the number of people that were laid off. But when you're talking about debt increase in 1 year, they're talking about like $5 trillion debt increase when this thing gets passed, and that's just beyond comprehension. That people say, well, we can work it out, and they can't work it out. Eventually, there's a collapse.
Yeah.
That is going to be a tragic event, and who knows what will happen in foreign policy when it happens. Maybe there will be less wars going on.
But I mean, I think that Musk did a tremendous service to this country, historic service to this country. He was able to make extremely popular the idea that we can make not just cuts around the edges, but serious, substantive cuts in government.
Right.
And it turns out Americans loved it. They wanted it to happen. Everything was set. He did this. He made this popular. And then, of course, Congress and the deep state did everything they could to stymie him. But I don't think that should detract from what he's done. I think he deserves a huge congratulations from Americans who are concerned about this. And hopefully he'll stick around. There's rumors that he's pulling back, but I think he's still needed.
In a way, maybe his position of not being an elected official, it became less political, and he doesn't need the job. He doesn't need to be doing this. So I think he had more credibility.
Yeah.
At least, if you have the average senator, it's so vitriolic in the fighting in the politics of it. So in many ways, he avoided that. And see, I think Trump has to deal with the politics of it. How am I going to get these people in the House to vote? And he has to play games with that. And that becomes very messy. Yeah. Sometimes it doesn't result in much at all.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to close out, Dr. Paul, and thank all of our viewers for watching today. Please look over there at that thumbs up or like, and please push it down if you don't mind. Please subscribe to our channel wherever you're watching it or listening to it. And share the show with your friends and your enemies even. Thanks for tuning in. Over to you, Dr. Paul.
Very good. I, too, want to thank our viewers for tuning in today and encourage them to spread our message. And this is a message I consider very important. And the number of people that come to this philosophy, the exact number is not as important as the people who believe in it, spreading the message and get in a position where they can make a difference. And that's the way the revolutionaries operated at the time of our revolution. There were a lot of well-educated individuals who could talk and defend historically, economically, and the whole works. And at the same time, they had to convince the masses of people to go along with that. So we do have a great task before us, and I believe that there's a lot of it to do with education and the understanding, because if they can't understand the fact that if you spend money without any conscious about it and just print up the money, it leads to a bubble, and bubbles burst, and you can't always wait until the end, except most of the time they do, and then they struggle to bail themselves out. So there are answers to the problems that we have, whether it's foreign policy or economic policy or social policy, and it's not complex. It's just defending and understanding the principles of personal liberty and the rejection of the use of force to bring about the changes that you want. But that isn't the way it works. There's too much force. Here are a lot of people going along with our efforts around the world, and we use a lot of force. And behind the scenes, of course, it's the military-industrial complex and other special interests that people have to realize as well. So a free society has to be understood and promoted. Believe me, under those circumstances, we'd have a lot less wars, and a lot more prosperity. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.